Hello, my name is David Hassler. I'm the director of the Wick Poetry Center at Kent State University, and I'm thrilled to participate today in a virtual AWP Conversation with Writers series. I'm also thrilled to have three guests on this with me today. Two nurses in our college, Kent State College of Nursing, and a Wick Poetry Center teaching artist. I'd like Mary Anthony and Taryn Brahana from our College of Nursing here to introduce themselves, and then I'd like Katie Daly to say a few words as well. Mary?
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Mary Anthony. I am a professor and associate dean for research in the College of Nursing, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here today to talk about science and poetry.
Thank you, Mary.
Me next. Sorry. Hi, my name's Taryn. I am a clinical instructor and lecturer in the College of Nursing, and I'm very happy to be here to talk about this as well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Taryn.
Hello, I'm Katie Daly. I am a poet, a memoirist, performance poet, and I'm also very lucky to be a teaching artist for the Wick Poetry Center. And one of the outreach jobs I do for Wick is at in University Hospitals Portage campus, and I work with patients doing expressive writing. So that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Katie. And the other reason why we're here today is to talk about our work with nurses and a way to honor the profession of nursing and our caregivers at a time of this global pandemic. We have an interactive website at travelingstanzas.com called Some Days. And we scripted a poem about 2.5 years ago for the Kent State College of Nursing, a poem that we called Some Days that gives voice to the experience of nursing written by faculty, students, and alumni. And we find at this time of this global pandemic, this poem to speak to our lives in a very meaningful way. And it offers a kind of prompt to invite others to share their voice and to honor the work of caregivers and nurses at this time. So I thought we could begin by watching a very short video community poem from this poem, Some Days, that was recorded by nurses at university hospitals in Cleveland, most of whom are alums of the Kent State College of Nursing program, as well as several professors in our Kent State College of Nursing. It's a beautiful and very moving poem that we recorded from a Zoom call in which the nurses each read different parts from this very large community poem that actually is installed as a mural in the Kent State College of Nursing building on campus. So let's listen and watch this video, and then I'd love to have a conversation with all of you about your reactions to how this video and this poem and this prompt can speak to our lives today.
Some days you'll wake up and know your life has a purpose.
This is who you are, who you want to be, a nurse.
Your arms will open like doors, welcoming those in need.
You do not know all the stories, but you will learn to become them.
Some days you'll feel a fire in your chest, as if the whole world is burning.
Some days you'll dream of helping families heal. Feel the flush of knowing you made a difference.
Your face will not be big enough to contain your smile.
Other days, you'll draw from that salty, replenishing river and know it's okay to cry.
Never forget nature's healing touch or the comfort of a wrinkled hand reaching out to you.
Some days you'll reach for the stars, wishing you had longer arms.
You'll break into a million pieces and call yourself confetti.
Other days, you'll scream with angry frustration, grasp a life in your hands as it fades away.
Yet still believe it is worth it.
Remember, your patients can teach you lessons greater than any you will hear in a lecture hall.
And though you cannot always bring relief, you can be present. Their humanity hold in your hand.
All the lines and scribbles of your life will make a picture.
Some days, with grace and grit, you'll know the work of a nurse is the work of the heart, sacred and profane.
Find your passion.
Let it write your story.
This is who you are, who you want to be.
A nurse.
A nurse.
A nurse.
Thank you, Taryn. I want to thank you for participating in this video. You're one of the voices and one of the nurses giving voice to this community poem. Maybe let's begin, Taryn, with you. You were not around at the time 2.5 years ago to work with us in building this community poem that came out of about 2 months of writing workshops. WIC Poetry Center led with Kent State College of Nursing, faculty, students, and alumni to celebrate the 50th anniversary of that college. But now, Taryn, you are teaching in the college and you are a nurse yourself. Talk to us a little bit about what it meant to you to participate in this community reading and to begin to think about how expressive writing can be so crucial and important during this time.
Right. So you're right. I didn't get to participate in the writing of it. It actually posted about a half a year before I joined the College of Nursing. So I almost feel like it, I felt a little bit ushered in by it. But what's kind of a little bit strange about it for me is that I walked past that poem every day for 2 years and never read it, never really thought much about it, to be perfectly honest.
You are being honest.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because you feel, you almost get a little bit of an ego. I'm that nurse, I don't need, I know how I feel about it. I don't really need to, need that kind of reflection. I'm at this place in my life, right? When I read it, it was a very moving experience to come to the end and have that repeated in your mind. So you think you're that nurse and you realize that the sum of all of your experiences, both before you started on your path to become a nurse and everything that's happened after that, it's synergistic. It's much more than just that degree that you get. And so everybody's a different kind of nurse and everybody comes with such, different experiences. And they're all good in contributing to the field. So what I think it means for today and what makes it so profound, currently is, of course, with everything that we're going through, I think that it has forced everybody to become so much more present in their everyday lives than they were before. So you're stuck at home or you're sheltered in place or however you want to say it. And, you get away from the technology for a little bit and it forces you to really take stock of what matters most.
Mary, you've talked with me and you were part of the original team that launched this project with the College of Nursing. You've talked with me about how much you love that one stanza in the community poem that talks about that you cannot always bring relief, but you can be present. Would you read that stanza for us, Mary, and tell us a little bit about what it is in that poetry that speaks to some emotional truth or an experience in your life?
I'd be happy to, because this stanza is one that of all the stanzas in the poem resonates with me at so many levels. And so I'm happy to read it and talk for the next hour about it, but here it goes.
Well, we're all done then.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Some days you'll enter your patient's pain, and although you cannot bring relief, you can be present. Their humanity pooled in your hand. And I want to read that last line again, because that is, to me, what nurses, that's their core presence, is that their humanity, the patient's humanity, is pulled in your hand. And that for me resonates for all the things that we do, based in science, based in people's health, that nurses hold people's humanity in their hand, that they are there with them for the triumphs, for the cure, for the healing, for the death, for the grief. And so it is nurses who, I think, hold that humanity and ease, or celebrate or ease, wherever the patient's at, because we respond with our humanity by holding their humanity wherever they are. And so that stanza, that particular line, culminated for me everything that what nursing is about. I've been a nurse for decades and decades, and I read about what nursing is. I read about what nursing does, but when I read it, it lacks just that emotional depth. And for me, all of what we are, that emotional present depth, that aligns with not only us being present, but all the science that we bring to what we do. And so for me as a nurse scientist, my first thought is, well, science and poetry don't really align very well. But on second reflection and deeper sort of reading and understanding, there's so much in the linguistic construction of both that they are not separate, but they really are so common. They have so many common characteristics between them.
Wow.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That makes me think of a beautiful quote from Jane Hirschfield, who curated poems about science for a Poets for Science initiative that we collaborated with her on and building in 2017 for the original March for Science. But Jane Hirschfield said, the microscope and the metaphor are both instruments of discovery. And so she talked about science and poetry are not opposites, but allies.
So it's really interesting, because after I heard the Some Days poem read, that was an aha moment for me, because my previous experience with poetry was very, very dated. And so hearing the poem read resonated with me. And in a subsequent project that we collaborated with you, David, in the Wick Poetry Center, we asked nurses at a research conference to tell us, using their imaginative language, the meaning of nursing research for them. And so based on their reflections, we were able to create another poem based on nursing science. Use what the meaning of nursing science is using poetry and generating a new creative pathway.
Wonderful. That's Katie. How is it that you want to build on this conversation with your experience working with so many different patients and caregivers, Katie?
Thank you, David. I do feel very humbled hanging out with these two nurses who are doing the physiological humanity work, and I'm not doing that. I'm just going into the hospital once a week and looking for patients who are willing to write. So I'm getting to know them in a very different way. But I'm going to read the third stanza from Some Days, because I relate to that in a special way. Some days you'll feel a fire in your chest, as if the whole world is burning. You'll feel your tongue fold inward, the weight of unspoken words flutters in your stomach and clogs your throat. So working as an outreach teaching artist, doing expressive writing with patients, I start by just introducing myself and we talk. And if I say I came to do some poetry with you, usually people are like, no, thanks. That's not my thing, honey. But if I just engage in conversation and get to know them a little and show them a little about me, then we have a somewhere to start with. I could find a poem to read them and we talk about it and then we read some more. But this stanza here, just that feeling when I start to hear and listen to patients' stories about what they're going through. I do work mostly with patients that are getting chemotherapy for cancer. So they're in the patient room for 3 hours or 6, so they have more time and they're more willing for whatever reason to work with me. But they have some pretty remarkable stories, not only about their disease and the side effects of the medicine and the chemo, and the pain and the grief of getting such a serious disease, but they're also often very willing just to tell me the stories of their lives. And I'm often I'm stunned into silence. Sometimes my job is to get them talking, so it's good that I'm silent, but it's just that you'll feel your tongue fold inward. The weight of unspoken word flutters in your stomach and clogs in your throat. Sometimes there's just nothing to say. And as a nurse, I can imagine, how that plays itself out every day, maybe when you're working with patients. But for me, it's, my first thought is I need to answer this person. They've just said something really vulnerable and intense about their experience or their life or their disease. I need to say something, but then it's a blessing that I'm kind of stunned into silence, because I think the best thing I can do as a human being and as an outreach teaching artist is to listen. And it's in our culture, I think it's so hard to remember that we don't have to fix everything right away with what we say. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just be silent and, maintain eye contact.
Yeah.
So that's one of the many stanzas I relate to with my experience.
Well, that sounds like as a writer, as a teaching artist, you're being present with the patients, with what skills, what craft you have to bring to them, in the same way that the nurses need to be present and fully present with the patients. It makes me think of this ability. Nell Morton, a feminist theologian from the late 70s, said that we have the capacity to hear each other into speech. The quality of my listening as you're talking, Katie, to create the conditions, a safe space and a fertile space to draw out so the patient can say something or write something that he or she might not have done before, because of the quality of your listening and the way you create those conditions.
In the hospital setting, or first time in their clinicals rather, and some of them have sought jobs as aides and they're used to it, but an awful lot of them, this is their first time in that hospital environment at all. And so they find themselves very, very uncomfortable with those silences, no matter what the patient is saying. And sometimes they're just chatting and just venting. And sometimes they are making these very profound statements that the kids always want to act on right away. And a lot of the times it's just them sharing humanity with you. And that's all you need to do is to receive it. So I think that's what that means for me. And I'm hoping to, have that someday when I'm in that situation, to be able to go through a life review without, judgment or anybody trying to fix any of my regrets.
Is there another stanza from the poem that one of you, Katie, for example, would like to read aloud and speak to in terms of your own experience leading writing workshops, Katie?
But I'm going to read this one. It is a patient in the Seidman Cancer Center at UH Portage Hospital, and she's a massage therapist, and so she's a caregiver. It's one reason why I chose this poem. And she we talked for a while, and then I read her some poems, like praise poems about different parts of life, praising, a barn or a horse or whatever. And she wanted to write a praise the body poem. So that's the title of it. And her name is Carrie Pounds. Praise the body. Be thankful for its healing wisdom, how it tells you of its needs, physical, emotional, spiritual. You will be rewarded if you listen to it closely. If, for instance, out of the blue, you crave a whole pan of okra, you better get you some. And if you're suddenly overcome with the notion to cuddle, find the closest barn and let the soft noses and wagging tails encourage you. Whisper a kiss on a horse's muzzle. Let the dog lick you hello. Let the cat's purr rumble deep into your soul. If you're sad, depressed, or angry, take a moment to think of all the things to appreciate of a day. You woke up, your legs walked you into the kitchen, and your eyes refreshed themselves, gazing upon God's green earth and vast blue sky. Praise to the people who care for you, near and far. A beautiful, luminous, golden web of love. So, I chose this partly because she was a caregiver and as a massage therapist, and I love her appreciation. I think she has a heightened appreciation of the body, as I think a lot of people in the medical field do. You understand the science of the body and the physiology and all those miracles that are happening all the time inside the body, while we're just going about our lives. But also that at the end, she does this kind of turnaround. I think it's hard for a lot of caregivers, whether professional or people who are taking care of family members at home. I think it's hard to accept care from others when you're used to being in the role of giving care. And I think it's important that in writing this poem, she was reflecting on her experience of being sick with cancer and getting chemo and going through the different recoveries from chemo and the side effects. And she mentioned, I'm really appreciative of all the nurses who've been taking care of me over the period of this illness, and that she put that in the poem. Praise to the people who care for you near and far, a beautiful, luminous, golden web of love. She was also including family members and friends. But I think it was really cool to see that happen. I'm reading into it, but just being with her in that moment when she chose to write that line, I feel like act of writing and praising the body, and praising things. I have a hunch she got into a deeper receptivity for the care that she's getting from all around her. So that was just a really strong moment.
I love it when you said, as a researcher, you're saying, well, it's some things we can't measure in the way that we're used to measuring things. And it's a whole nother realm.
So, right. So I think the stanza that I would read and then talk a little bit about is the stanza that reads, "Some days with grace and grit, you'll know the work of a nurse is the work of the heart, sacred and profane." Recently, that, to me, there's words in there that are opposite but in juxtaposition. It's grace and grit. What does the grace mean? What does the grit mean? And the work of the heart is sacred and profane. Those two words also, on first glance, seem to be opposite, but they align in, again, I think nicely with how the work of the nurse is so multidimensional. With grace, what does grace mean? It means to be acting in some kind of elegance way. Well, how do nurses do that? And I think that there's a whole body of understanding about what it means to be a professional nurse. And I think that it is with that grace that we execute that. And with grit, I like, grit is one of those words that we use very commonly in everyday language. But actually, Angela Duckworth has done a lot of work from the psychology perspective in terms of that grit is both the strength and the perseverance. I think it is, I just want to be sure that I got that right. Oh, it is the passion, pardon me, the passion and the perseverance. And I think that, when we look at, what is a nurse, that stanza for me puts words in a very eloquent way, all of the clips we see on television of what nurses have been doing with COVID patients. We see that they are using iPads to facilitate the process of dying. That's graceful and that's grit. Okay. We know that they are doing incredibly innovative things to take care of those patients. That is with, again, the grace and the grit for their to accomplish what patients need at the moment. So I think the grace and the grit is another very meaningful word that kind of summarizes what nurses do at the bedside day in and day out to help patients.
Beautiful. Taryn, thoughts? Is there a stanza again from the larger poem or from the video that you want to read again and comment on?
Yeah, the one from Some Days that speaks to me, and there are some that Mary and I are, we landed on the same one that we both really like. Personally, for me, this one speaks to me on multiple levels, and it's, some days your heart will crumble like crust, and when the beeping stops, you will feel in your nostrils a burning void. And it's, to me, it speaks to me in two ways right now. The first is when you turn off the ventilator and you turn off the IV pumps and everything that was sustaining life for that patient, because it's the end. When the silence that comes after that moment is very heavy. It is very palatable. It is a profound moment that you are experiencing at that time. It's just so much more than just death. It's much, much more than that. And so that is, to me, it speaks to me on that way, that there's just nothing, everybody experiences it very, very differently, but that statement of it, giving something physical to that moment was what makes that stanza profound. The other way it spoke to me after I read it a couple more times is how you feel when you are away from something that you love for an extended period of time. So, we're lucky to not have the incredible numbers of COVID in our area that are happening elsewhere. And I'm not needed right now. So I haven't been out in the field for a good 5-6 weeks. And I'm having dreams, I didn't realize just how much I loved it until then. And I feel whole kinds of way, actually. I feel relieved you're not having to be out there in it and seeing it. You feel guilty because you have this skill set that can help, but you're not needed here right now. I can't leave my family and go to New York. I can't, you feel guilty for saying that out loud. And so so the dreams that I have, I'm hearing the heart monitor beeps. I'm hearing the BiPAP. Mary knows what that sounds like. Every 2 seconds, they're trying to get that thing off, and it goes boop beep beep boop beep boop. It sounds just like that, and I'm hearing that on a regular basis, and just didn't think that I would, and didn't think that I would ache this much, to be back in the fray, So that's kind of really puts that into language in black and white on paper for me.
Wow. Emerging out of this is, I think, a deeper desire to participate in what we're calling a community poem, a way for people to share their voice and add their voice to a larger conversation, which right now, with our Some Days model poem and our interactive website, people can go and click on that Traveling Stanza website and share their voice. So I'm just curious what you all think. I mean, our traditional model is that we have individual authors, and this is my personal work of art. This is my poem. I'm the author of this creative work. But we're building something that invites people to participate in a collective effort, and sort of push those boundaries of what we often think of traditionally as originality and personal ownership, but rather participate in this global collective effort to give voice and to honor nursing and caregiving during this global pandemic. What are your thoughts on that tension there between the personal and the collective? Because Taryn, what I'm hearing in your beautiful story, and you're saying about how you have these dreams and you want to be of use.
Yeah.
You want to join a larger effort, and for your individual skills to be absorbed and to offer benefit to a larger effort. How is it in voice, perhaps, in this idea of building community poems? Are we doing that with language?
So it's very, trying to figure out the best way to say this. It's a very nursing method almost to putting this all together, because everything that we do in nursing, I know in medicine too, but everything we do in nursing builds on what those have done before us. So we've found that there is a science to our healing, and that there is you bring in your personal voice, and we study that, and we see, does this method, work over here? Does this work over there? How does this intervention that you might have been doing on your own for a while, let's study that and see how that works. So there's a lot of personal input to this larger pool of information that we're drawing on. And so I feel like with this poem that it becomes greater than the sum of its parts. I hate to, use a cliche, but it really does, because everybody brings in that personal story in the stanza that they write that could resonate with so many other people. And just like we've been talking about today, you're able to put into words how somebody else is feeling. And it's not even just happening with poetry. Yesterday, I was listening to Tracy Motter's address for our BSN convocation, which of course we had to do online. And at the end of it, she said something that resonated so well with me, and basically saying, as a Kent State grad, you're going to be that nurse. You're going to be that nurse that questions this. You're going to be that nurse that stands up for that. You're going to be that nurse that advocates for that. And so, my stanza would have been something along the lines of, some days you'll be that nurse, and some days you'll be that nurse. So that's what I think this project does, is brings us all together in that way.
Great.
I wanted to say something about that. You're talking about that whole communal nature of the community poem, and there's a great article in the Atlantic a few weeks ago talking about how since the virus has become a pandemic and there's so many people that are out on their patios singing to each other, or the daily thing going on, at least in New York at 7 o'clock p.m., applauding all the healthcare
Right.
workers and thanking them. And there's this move away. What is becoming less popular right now in this moment is celebrity singers and celebrity musicians, and it's much more people are making music at home and sharing it with each other online, and that is actually a very ancient human habit. Traditional cultures, ancient cultures, the idea of audience is almost non-existent. Everybody is expected to contribute something to whatever kind of music or song or even story that you're making together, and that just thrills me so much, and it reminds me of nursing as a profession. You are there's you're much community, as you said, Taryn. You're a community on a floor of a hospital, and you're all working together, and you see that in extra high relief. What's going on now, we're seeing so much media and inside hospitals that are dealing with this intense um health emergency. And I think nurses, I mean, all high respect, high praises to doctors. They're just as important, but they kind of, in the hierarchy of medicine, they kind of they're put at the top, and yet it's the nurses that know so much about the humanity of the patient, and that is part of the whole healing, as opposed to just the details on the chart that the doctor looks at. Both are necessary and important. I'm not dissing doctors at all, but I just think that that whole hierarchical thinking in all professions and in poetry making, we could all stand to shred that a little, turn it into confetti.
Yeah, and I think that's happening little by little. It's not so much the top down that it used to be. It's definitely, you have some docs that are like that, but it's definitely getting a lot better in that regard. And this is this is so hard on them too. I mean, we just heard the news about the New York physician that committed suicide when she went home to visit her family. And so, so I'm happy to see that kind of going away. And I feel like that our profession, it is one of the most ancient, and it's like basically the first profession that allowed us to become a civilization. If we can't heal you while the rest of the herd is out getting their food, then you're a goner. So we're nursing you. It's only just been the last 100 or 150 years that we've started that we added the science to it. So, yeah.
I think, David, just very quickly, thoughts about a community poem. And I think both Taryn and Katie alluded to this, but I think it's an important point, is that we are communities within communities. And so as a community of nurses, we're in communities of healthcare and communities of just human beings. And so our nursing community shares many norms and cultures and practices and beliefs. And we have pathways that we share for being there for patients. So I think, and there isn't only one way to express, I think what those norms and beliefs are about us holding patients' humanity in our hands. And so I think the community poem is just an incredible way to gather just multiple perspectives on how that happens.
Katie, thinking about what you've read about what's happening in New York at 7 p.m. when the caregivers are coming back, it makes me think of our own Ohio Department of Health Director, Dr. Amy Acton, who's been on these daily press briefings with our Ohio Governor, Mike DeWine. And I believe she said it was in March when they first announced the stay-at-home order in Ohio. And I feel lucky that I think we've had wonderful leadership here in Ohio from our governor's office and from Dr. Amy Acton. She said, "I know it feels like life is shutting us down, but I feel that life is waking us up." And, I think this idea of being in this crisis, woken up to our inner potentials in ourselves, but our deep relationship and care for each other, and deeper connection to each other, and how our lives are intertwined so subtly and powerfully, and very often in very invisible ways, as we see with the workings of a virus, but then with the workings of the human heart and the desire and the creative innovation to connect and to offer praise and care for one another, in the way we improvise and come out onto our balconies to applaud or to sing, like was happening in Italy at the end of the day with our neighbors, or to share our voices and build a community poem that we're hoping to do with this project, and to use this video and to use the simple prompts on our website to inspire and encourage others to share their voice and participate in a larger global community poem to honor our nurses and caregivers. So we're waking up to new modalities, to new ways of interacting with one another, at a time when we find so many constrictions in our lives. In some ways, we're waking up to a deeper potential inside us.
And I think this is another example of how the lines and scribbles make a picture of our life. And this is another whole series of lines and scribbles that we didn't ask for, but here we are.
And making a picture, making a work of art, and it's making meaning. It's healing. It's integrating the lines and scribbles into some picture, some frame, some expression that feeds us, that makes sense, that we can share with one another. Taryn, you mentioned the poem by the Maplewood Career Center students. It's one of the poems in our Healing Stanzas collection that the Wick Poetry Center has been building over 7 or 8, 9 years now. And I think it's a poem I want to read briefly, and we have a beautiful poster designed as part of our traveling stanza poster that I hope we can share visually as I read this poem. And again, it's another example of a community poem. So we led a workshop with 12th grade language arts students using a poem by Mary Oliver, in which she says, bless my hands, bless my ears. And she comes up with a metaphor for the parts of her body and how she praises them, how they are portals to the world, and in her senses, and how they make her life more whole. And these 12th graders, we charged the air with Mary Oliver's poem, and it was from a much longer book length poem, and they wrote their own ode to their bodies, and then we pulled lines from individual students and made one big class community poem and brought it back for their approval, which they loved, and then designed it as a poster, which has traveling in school, in buses and trains in Akron. I mean, the Akron Metro bus system, the Cleveland RTA train. So it's our own way to publish poems in our own community, to hear voices from our own community members. So it speaks, I think, to the situation we're in now and this conversation about nursing and healing and our bodies. It's called Ode to My Body. Bless the ear, a gateway for laughter. Bless the eyebrow, bushy with wisdom. Bless the foot, which gives equilibrium to an unstable world. Bless the wrist, articulate as a spider. Bless the heart, how it beats even when broken. Bless the mouth and its ocean of words. Bless the chest, the loudest drum of all. Bless the belly button, which is the scar of love. And like we all aspire to when we pause and enter into the flow of our own writing or our own work of art, we're looking for that aha moment to surprise ourselves when the language speaks back to us and we don't even know where it came from. And I promise you, the girl, the 12th grade girl who raised her hand and read her poem and that ended with "Bless the belly button, which is the scar of love." There was a look of utter surprise on her face and on everyone's face in the entire classroom to see that leap of thought, that metaphor that says the truth about a complicated thing.
That's what spoke to me about it, because I saw that it was from Maplewood, so I knew the age range of the students there. So, and I can see that age range until I got to that last line. And then when I read that one, I was like, that did not sound like it came from a high school senior. It sounded like it came from somebody much older with more experience than that to know what that means, you know? It was beyond his or her years, I would say.
Well, all I can say is, isn't that what we all aspire to, to draw down a leaping thought, language that doesn't feel like it comes from us, but from some ageless and infinite creative stream of energy and source. Mm-hmm. And, I think collectively right now, we're all trying to tap into that ability to connect with one another and to draw down wisdom that will help guide us through this very troubling and difficult time. And the two of you, Mary and Taryn, being the nurses, being the caregivers and the teachers of nursing, I know that, as Katie mentioned, we as writers feel such gratitude to you and to all of the folks who are working in this important profession at this moment, and to merge, I think, that of expressive writing and that of true expressive healing, physical healing. The physical, the physical and very emotional and spiritual. The sacred and the profane. All of these mergings of opposites, or of what we often separate as opposites, merging them together into a larger whole, a larger healing. I just thank you both, and Katie, I thank you for the work you continue to do in our Northeast Ohio community around writing and healing.